Hello, and welcome to today's YBMB show. Those of you who follow, and there's quite a lot of you now, will know that we run this live 3 times a week. On Mondays, we talk about body. On Wednesdays, we talk about mindset. On Fridays, we talk about business. And I often am lucky enough to have a guest who's particularly knowledgeable about an area. And today we're talking about nutrition. And so I'm so happy to have Clarissa Lenherr on with us. Welcome, Clarissa.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Thrilled to be chatting on here and to be asked to be, talking all things nutrition with you. So
yeah, well, I mean, those of you who you can look Clarissa up later on. She's on Instagram, got a fantastic page, and I met Clarissa actually talking about my own nutrition, and I love it when I speak to people and they're quite clearly very knowledgeable. Clarissa is a registered nutritionist. But also they can put things in layman's language, which means that those of us who need that, we can still understand it. And I think many of us, believe that we're healthy eaters, but it is nice to know the science behind it as well. And you may know, if you've been following me for some time, that for the last 4.5 years since I started my own sort of transformation through weight training and became, more and more knowledgeable about nutrition, what I realize is not only does it have a massive impact on the way that you look, but also how you feel physically, but even more importantly, I believe, mentally. And then that in turn influences what you actually do with your life and the things, how you deal with setbacks and how you push things forward. So hence pulling together the Your Body Means Business program in 2018. So Clarissa has joined us to talk about nutrition. And to start off with, Clarissa, I mean, you had a really lovely story about a career change. And one of the things that I did previously was to work very much with careers. And I always am a big advocate of people changing careers and doing lots of different things and following their passion, etc. You did just that, didn't you? So tell us a little bit about that.
For sure. So yeah, and look, I always tell others as well, don't be scared of making the change. You're never too old or too far away from your goals or anything like that. I think it's so important to kind of speak out about that. So I think that's great. So I graduated from Nottingham University in history. And everyone asked me what I was going to do, and they assumed I'd be a librarian or a teacher, because that's what you do with history, apparently. And I had no intention of doing that at all, and fell into doing marketing for property companies, working in the City of London, internationally as well. And I noticed, as much as I had a good skill set in that area, I noticed that I was quite unhappy. And I noticed that those around me were struggling with a lot of health concerns. And you work hard, play hard, you get those kind of repercussions if you don't look after yourself. And I was always talking to everyone about health, saying, I was spending my time reading all of these health books and watching webinars and things like that. And my husband said, look, you're unhappy, you don't feel fulfilled. He was then my boyfriend, now husband. He'll like the fact that I referred to him here.
Well, he also gave you some good advice. So
he did.
Yeah.
And he said, you're not too old, because I was like, I'm far too old to go and restudy again. He said, you're absolutely not. Go and do it. You'll find a way to do it. You'll manage it. And I did, and went and retrained part-time. I was working full-time, and it was definitely a commitment, but I will never change anything. To be honest, I wouldn't change any part of the course that I was on, because I think that skill set from marketing and working in the corporate environment really shaped the way that I speak to individuals and help people, and part of my business. So retrained and never looked back, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lovely story, and so pleased to hear that. One of the things that you mentioned is about how you look back and you join the dots up afterwards, and it leads you to where you are. And I know that you're saying that a lot of your business, I know you're based in Harley Street ordinarily, and we had a Harley Street doctor on just the other day, and he's done a lot of advice on Zoom he gives now, like yourself. So it's amazing how we can transition when we have to. But also you were saying that a lot of your clientele is corporate, and you spend a lot of time talking to people in a corporate environment about sort of stress management and things like that. So one would think that, how come, you're a nutritionist and yet you're talking about stress management. So tell us, should we start a little bit with that? Because although this is the body day, we are interested in mindset and career as well. So it'd be really nice to hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think a lot of the time people think that nutritionist, dietitian, nutritional therapist, however, whatever qualification you've got, they think, oh, you're just talking about food. That's it. It's just food. And it's so much more than that, particularly if you're looking at holistic health. You know, you've got to look at sleep patterns. You've got to look at relationships, habits around food, stress management, self-care, your relationship with food and your body. So stress is a massively important one. And for me, I would say the majority of the clients I'm seeing in my practice, the majority have some form of stressor that is either a antecedent, trigger, or a mediator in what's going on in their sort of with their concern. So you can't kind of, in my practice anyway, you can't separate the two. You kind of have to work with them combined. And there's so much you can do through diet, nutrition, movement, exercise to help support your stress levels. And it can be detrimental in some respects, and it can also have a really positive effect. So there's lots of ways that you can manage your stress through looking after your body with the food that you eat or don't eat.
Yeah, what's a couple of tips in that area? You know, if anyone is watching this, thinking about managing their stress. I mean, we'll go into a bit more detail, but just a couple of things at the top of your head that you first go-tos that we could easily implement.
Yeah, I think, and this is a foundational tool. Doesn't matter what you're trying to achieve here, but balancing your plates. I know we kind of made a reference to it just before when we were chatting away, but balancing your plates effectively in having the right macro groups, so the larger food groups, protein, fats, carbohydrates, things like that. Being able to balance your plate means that you're balancing your energy intake. A lot of diets are filled with refined carbohydrates, so these tend to be white carbohydrates or free sugars, added into foods. And unfortunately, what that can do to our energy levels is send us on this yo-yo roller coaster. You feel like you can, run your 5K in the morning, and 45 minutes later, you're craving chocolate, sweets as a coping mechanism to get your energy back up from not having a proper breakfast, for example. If our energy is on a yo-yo all day long, this blood sugar roller coaster, which we refer to it as, your stress levels, your mood is going to follow suit, because you're peaking and you're troughing. And when you trough and kind of have that low dip of energy with all the willpower in the world, it's really unlikely that you're going to go, you know what, I fancy some almonds or some steamed broccoli. What you want is fast-acting, energy-rich foods, which tend to be sugar, refined carbohydrates, and caffeine, which are three of the kind of stress antagonists that you can kind of have in your diet. So you don't want to be kind of picking up those foods, going back on the blood sugar roller coaster, and before you know it, you've had a really stressful day on top of everything else that goes on in modern day life. So absolutely trying to have, I normally try to get people using their hands or visualizing a plate, but quarter of your plate should be protein, or at least for women, 1 palm of protein, or 1.5 palms for men. If you have a lot of high intensity exercise or weight training, your requirements will be higher, and you should work with someone privately to kind of work that out. But that's roughly the amount. Quarter of your plate as complex carbohydrates. So all of those kind of brown, fiber-rich carbohydrates to keep you really full. And I often ask people, I say, when was the last time that quarter of your plate was carbohydrates? And most people are like, it's half, if not more. And then lots of colourful fruits and veg, and a good sort of thumb size for women, 2 thumbs for men of fat on the plate. That's really going to balance your energies. Energy helps with weight management, productivity, mood. So it's really, really foundational. So absolutely start there. Get your macro intake ratio correct and sort of balanced as much as you can. Be mindful of your caffeine. So when we consume anything with caffeine, and we secrete cortisol and our stress hormones, so that's going to be detrimental to anyone who's suffering with sort of chronic stress levels, high stress levels. So we want to be sort of thinking about reducing that and not relying on caffeine as our energy source. And 400 milligrams is the recommended maximum intake, which is about 5 espresso shots or 8 cups of very light tea. So if you're above that, if you're one of these people that's having 4 in the morning, that's going to be detrimentally affecting your stress levels. So bring that back. Replace.
How many espresso shots did you say?
5.
Really? What, per day or per week?
Yeah, per day.
Wow, that's quite a lot.
I know, that's the upper threshold. But you've got to remember, if you are someone that's very stressed, you're doing a lot of high intensity exercise, you have a stressful work and also home balance, anything like that, stressful current climate that you're living in, these kind of things all incrementally build up and affect your stress levels. So if you're stressed and you notice when you drink caffeine, you get angsty, you get a little bit irritable, bring that back over time slowly. Those are my 2 things that you absolutely should start with. There are lots of others, but those are the 2 definitely.
I mean, I know that when people come on to the YBMB program, one of the things that the very first thing we do, and often people come for different reasons, some they come because they they've seen the body shots and they basically want to, recreate their body. They want to get a better looking body, and all the things that come with that. Sometimes though, it's about their business. They just want to get the energy, or maybe it's their mindset that don't feel confident. Variety of different reasons, but whatever it is, we always start with the foundation, which is the body, and that starts with, the things you mentioned, sleep, water as well, but also what they're eating. We get a baseline, and what we find is the vast majority of people just have so many refined carbs, far too many, and they don't have anywhere near enough protein. And I always find it interesting because when you think about a gram of protein or a gram of carbs, it's got the same number of calories in. And people always say to me, I really struggle to get my protein in, can't hit, that target. And yet they have no trouble hitting the carb target. In fact, they have trouble bringing it back down. It's not like even sometimes that we're actually getting them to eat more. The fats are okay. I think the thing with fats is that people often don't realize that they'll eat a whole avocado having no idea, the huge amount of calorific content in it, or they'll willy-nilly throw some olive oil over something, and every tablespoon of olive oil is about 100 calories. So there's things like that, which is more an education. I find that people do tend to have healthy fats, but it's the carb protein thing in this in the society that we're in, fast moving. It's quite hard to get the proteins in, isn't it?
Absolutely.
When people are not used to it, I mean.
Yeah, when you're not used to it, exactly. And actually, protein is so satiating and filling. So if you're hitting that protein intake, your carbohydrate, you should be so full that you have to undo your genes if you're getting in the carbohydrates on top of the good amount of protein. So actually always trying to go, okay, looking at my plate, where's my protein come from first? Let's make that the priority here. And then the carbohydrates come second, and fruits and veg should always be there regardless. But doing it that way, so you're filling up with the protein first rather than the carbohydrates, then trying to fit in the protein, you're like, I'm so full, I can't fit in anything more. I'll just leave that part because it's easier to do it that way.
And I always think as well, to get people to think differently about food and avoid thinking about it, because very often we associate it with entertainment and fun and relaxation and certainty. If you eat something, you're going to feel a certain way, or if you drink a glass of wine, you're going to feel a certain way. But trying to sort of change your habits a bit and realize that food is actually fuel, and start to sort of think about it much more about, you wouldn't put poor quality fuel in your best car, and yet you've got only this one body, and people are pumping down like blue drinks and God knows how many E numbers, and they don't even know, they're eating stuff. It really is a revelation. We have people coming on the program 40s, 50s, and they think, wow, I've been eating this for years and I just didn't realize the calorie content with sugar, because that's the other thing. Sugar is so dangerous, and I don't know what you've got anything to say about the sugar, actually, how people could reduce that, because most people have far too much sugar for a healthy diet, aren't they? Even if they don't look unhealthy.
Yeah, and exactly. Yeah, that's totally right. Yeah. I think you touched on so many amazing points there. So in terms of sugar, a lot of the time, well, there was a kind of understanding around, if you wanted to lose weight, you cut out fat. And it's far too simplistic, but people thought that. And unfortunately, what happened is the food companies went, okay, we're going to cut out fat, and instead we're going to replace it with sugar so it's palatable. And unfortunately, a lot of sugar in the diet can lead to accumulated weight. So actually people are eating these low-fat products thinking, oh, they taste delicious and I can continue eating them, and yet they're eating spoons and spoons of sugar. And that is going to send that blood sugar going all over the place, as well as trigger stress. So really interesting one there. I think in terms of your sugar intake, it can be a complicated journey. So as you mentioned before, people are looking at entertainment, or they're looking at food in certain ways, and particularly in the current climate, they have an emotional, perhaps, void or hole that they want to fill, and food is the one consistent we have at the moment, and something to look forward to. And so you do see sugar kind of intakes going up like this quite drastically, but it's difficult because firstly you've got to untie the relationship that you've got with the certain food group that you're struggling with. So if it's sugar, you've got to stop and go, am I hungry, or am I eating for X emotion? And if it's that X emotion, you've got to find out firstly where that's coming from, which is not my speciality, but you've got to find where that's coming from and replace it with something non-food related. So something self-care, like listening to a podcast, calling a friend, going for a walk, having a herbal tea. Doesn't sound as enjoyable, but breaking that habit formation is really, really important when it comes to sugar, because it can be difficult. And And the second thing is trying to get a little bit of, experimentation going on in the kitchen. Try out these kind of slightly more natural sort of sugar options or less sweet options. So instead of going and buying, big pack of brownies or giant bar of chocolate bar, instead actually do a little bit of batch cooking, a little bit of preparing, make something that's, has a little bit of dates in, a little bit of honey, because it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. For some people it does. Some people, they're an all or nothing kind of personality and that works for them. But if you actually just kind of make replacements rather than introducing new habits, it's far easier to kind of get to your goals rather than trying to introduce lots of new habits, which often is why people kind of fall off the bandwagon.
And I think there's a couple of good psychological things there with sugar as well, because what I was reading was that there's about 10 major food companies, and they create all the 10,000 or so food brands. And what they realize, these 10 companies, roughly 10, is that sugar obviously is very addictive. It's very, very addictive. And so why not just put it in everything, and then people want to eat it? And they even put sugar in cigarettes as well.
Yeah.
So it's not our fault if we suddenly have been hooked on sugar, but once we recognize it, then then we really have the option to do something about it. And the way that I always tackle that is to say, well, look, it's enjoyable, obviously, to eat sugary things if you recognize it's an addiction, and think about what else is enjoyable. Isn't it enjoyable to really sort of take a view now that I'm going to build my body, no matter where it is, no matter where I am, no matter how old I am. Now is the time I'm going to turn a new page, and I'm actually going to start to take pleasure in building my body now into a really effective machine. And it doesn't take long to start to feel a lot better, does it?
Absolutely.
When you change the way. And I think another thing that I wanted to ask you about is so many diets and things that I see advertised and people talk about. It's all about what you can't eat and what you mustn't eat and what to cut out and all of that, instead of focusing very much on the things that you can have and that are a delight to have. And it doesn't have to be complex green juices and vinegars, this, that, and the other, does it? It can just be finding some things that give you the nutrients that you really enjoy, and having more of them. And how do you transition people when they want to do something different?
Yeah, I think what you said there is exactly on point. It's also about getting back to kind of natural, normal food that you find in the supermarket, rather than all of these convenience options. And I know it's difficult for people because people are time poor, they don't have the creativity or the will to do so, but just getting back to kind of whole foods is a really great place to start. So instead of picking up a brownie or a chocolate bar, go for the kind of whole food options or make them yourself. You're also going to get a lot of joy out of that.
You don't brand whole foods, do you? You mean just like the...
No, yeah, exactly. Sorry, whole food.
Yeah.
Real food.
Yes.
You can find in a forest or in a farm, things like that. Yeah. But in terms of transitioning people, so they come to see me and they want to get healthier. How do they do it? How do they get over these kind of milestones? And one of the things is to say it's not about restriction. Yes, there are some people that I tell you have to, reduce, or if they're seeing me for gut health issues, they might have to remove for a period of time certain food groups. But I always highlight these are the wonderful things to bring in. Let's focus on bringing in more oily fish, more eggs, more, wonderfully delicious, colorful fruits and vegetables. It doesn't have to be a green juice. It can be roasted butternut squash or roasted celeriac with loads of garlic and olive oil, which is absolutely delicious. At the beginning, there's often a little bit of a phase where you have to palate cleanse, I call, in other words, where you have to kind of go a bit cold turkey with it all and start again, because otherwise, if you go from eating, I'm not going to name and shame a brand, but if you go from eating a high street chocolate bar to then picking up something that is maybe dates with almond butter or a piece of dark chocolate with a nice cup of herbal tea, that's not going to do it for you if you're coming straight from here. So you've got to kind of go a bit cold turkey for a bit, and it's difficult. So you have a 1 week, 2 week transition normally, and then you kind of start introducing these foods, and they taste like, fruits end up tasting like candy when you stop having the foods over here. But there has to be a period of time where you work on yourself and unravel some of those relationships, and also kind of just try to pull away from that eating habit you've got into.
Yeah, and I think as well that people can sort of start as they mean to go on, but you don't have to do a wholesale change. You could say, okay, well, I'm just going to change my breakfast. So instead of having a sweet, toast and marmalade or whatever, and I'm going to have eggs and broccoli, which would sound strange to a lot of people, but then you have it and then you get used to it, like you get used to anything. We're really such creatures of habit. And you get that done, and then you think, okay, right, so now I'm used to that. Let me change the snacks that I have. Instead of having, like you said, you know, a processed sort of chocolate bar or a biscuit, what I'm going to have is, and you can swap it out for maybe a piece of fruit or yogurt with some berries and almonds, or because you're really going to fancy it then. So if you're really hungry, and then you can swap out your lunch. I mean, I always have for lunch, or very often for lunch, what I had for dinner. So I always make more than one lot and then have it for lunch. And there's lots of little tricks like that. One of the things that I always get asked is how, you know, does it matter how many foods you have? Can you have it all in one go? Does it matter if you eat it at the end of the day? Should you really be fasting? I mean, what's your thoughts on that? Because I do find that people are just starting, they want to ask a million complicated questions. And my view is, don't worry about that yet. You know, just let's get the basics. But anyway, people do ask that. So what's your thoughts?
Yeah. And I think that's right. Small incremental changes can make such a huge difference if you just give it a bit of patience. And often people will come to see me and they'll say, you've only told me to change a few things. I thought I was going to have an overhaul of my life. And I was like, if we do an overhaul of your entire diet, in 2 weeks' time, you're going to be, you know, binge eating dairy milk and all the rest of it because you didn't stick to it. So it's much easier that way. But in terms of trying to get people, giving them the information that they want, all these kind of questions, and there are lots of them. Yeah, I think you have to kind of guide people that it's not an overnight journey. It's not a one pill trick or anything like that. It's a constant evolution into a healthy lifestyle where you have a healthy relationship with food. You know, you enjoy cake maybe 20% of the time, and 80% of the time you eat well and you have the right breakfast, you meditate, you take, you know, not too much caffeine, things like that. And so I'm always about that kind of 80-20 rule.
Definitely.
But in terms of the questions, I mean, it's different and individual with each person. Each one person has their kind of myth that they've learned or read on, you know, a search engine. For example, you can't eat X at dinner, or, you know, you can't have, you know, I don't know, you can't have too many eggs because it's going to affect your cholesterol or something like that, where they've read it online.
Carbs at night and all things like that. Yeah.
Or do I fast? Don't I fast? And you do see that a lot with all of these dietary principles out there, particularly fasting, which I'm going to be doing a live on tomorrow actually with Bionic. But it's an interesting field out there, and to be honest, that's what makes my, you know, profession, is that I have these constant questions, so I've got to keep answering them. But I'm trying to think, is there one or two that you want me to kind of myth bust?
Yeah, I suppose, maybe can you have carbs at night? Can you have, you know, how many times a day should you ideally eat?
Yeah,
they're great. Good to have breakfast or not have breakfast? How about those three?
Those are great. Okay, the very frequent ones. Okay, so the carbs one at night. You can have carbohydrates at night. I always try to get people thinking about what works for their body and what feels good. And this kind of answers all the questions. But, you know, some people are breakfast people and they have to have breakfast. Other people like a light dinner. So you got to find the rhythm that your body works for, because just because it works for your colleague, friend, Instagram influencer, or person in front of the newspaper doesn't mean it's right for you. You've got to listen to your own body and get a bit intuitive. But in terms of carbohydrates at night, there's nothing wrong with having a bit of carbohydrates, but I do tell people, try not to stick to those ratios. If you're having quarter of your plate as complex carbohydrates at night, that's totally fine, particularly complex carbohydrates. So there's brown carbs, brown rice, brown pasta, things like that. Totally fine. I do normally say try to eat at least 3 hours, if not more, before bed, so that you actually utilize the energy you get from the carbohydrates. Because if you're having a lot of carbohydrates going straight to bed, you're not utilizing that energy, and carbohydrates are our body's preferred source of fuel. They give us a lot of glucose. So I do say that if there was one meal to reduce your carbohydrates at, I'm not saying eliminate at all, but reduce your carbohydrates, it would be dinner time, because in the morning and at lunch, you're utilizing a lot more of that energy if you're having breakfast. So that's the carbohydrate thing. And I think if you're sticking to those portions at every meal, which is what I do, nothing wrong. Also, carbohydrates do feed our gut bacteria, which help us produce serotonin, which is our feel-good, happy hormone. So it can help with people who I see a lot of the time on these low-carb, no-carb diets, and then they're wondering why they can't sleep or they're low in mood, and actually need some carbohydrates to help your gut produce these wonderful neurotransmitters and hormones that contribute to sleep and mood. So I'm not pro the no-carb thing at all.
Just to sort of add on to that there, you know, when you have a big meal, you know, what do you want to do? You want to sit down and sort of like, oh,
Yeah.
your body wants to relax or maybe even go to sleep because, you know, it wants to leave your body to digest. And I always do say to people, look, if you want to have carbs at night and it fits within your macros, if you're, you know, following a calorie controlled diet and a macro diet, then by all means have them, because it's going to make you want to sleep. And as long as you're hitting the macros that you've set and it's a good baseline, I personally, if I've got more carbs to have, so I like you said, I like to have them in the day to fuel my workouts and to keep me sort of stable mentally and switched on, energetic, you know, mentally, etc. If I've got some left, I'll have them in a shake, etc. And always end up having a good sleep. But I think, like you said, it's it really is depends on your body clock as well, because if you really need them in the morning, have them in the morning.
Yeah. Absolutely, which kind of like nicely leads on to that. Do you have to have 2 meals a day, or, you know, is breakfast important? I'll try and tackle them together. Yeah. The thing with breakfast is it is a little bit of a myth that it prompts your metabolism and all the rest of it. It's dependent on the individual. So some people absolutely cannot skip breakfast. They feel very shaky, their stress levels go up, but then there are certain conditions. So if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, trying to conceive, you should be having routine meals. If you're pre-diabetic or you have any sort of hypoglycemia, so where your blood sugar drops very frequently, got to have those regular meals, even better, more than 3, sometimes 5. There are other people who have breakfast and feel really lethargic the whole day and actually do much better in a fasted state for the morning. So again, it might not be the answer you want to hear, yes or a no answer, but actually it's the most valuable answer, in that just be your own guinea pig and listen to how your body works. So for me, I know that I've never really been a huge breakfast person. Occasionally I will, but there are times where I actually can go without breakfast until sort of 11, 12. If I'm exercising, it's a different kettle of fish, but I can go and I actually feel great. I feel really energetic, really clear thinking. And my 2 other meals, and I'll probably have a snack as well, are really well balanced. I'm getting in all my nutrients. So again, it kind of answers that. And that's the same with the 2-3 meals a day. You know, there is this whole thing, should we snack and have 5 intervals, or should we have 2 or 3? Find what fits and makes you feel really good. The one thing I will say is that I do quite like, instead of grazing, there's a difference between grazing and snacking. I don't mind a good snack between lunch and dinner to tide your blood sugar level over, so you don't crash and then crave macaroni and cheese. If you're going to have, you know, some carrots and hummus and then have salmon with brown rice, so much better than having, you know, that crash. But there is a difference, and I do see it a lot, people grazing. So every hour they want some nuts, some crisps, some carrots, or even if it's healthy, that's not beneficial. And additionally, it can actually put a lot of stress on the digestive system. So I do kind of try to set a 3 to 4 hour rule between meals, where you kind of let your body really work its magic in digesting and utilizing the food you've had from your last meal.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's about knowing what it is that you're actually putting into your mouth, because the grazing can be quite dangerous, because, you know, you can keep picking, and you have no idea what nutrients you're putting in. Whereas if you are wanting to get that balance of nutrients and to know what your baseline is, because at the end of the day, you know, with our bank account, we count our money, we count what's coming in, what's coming out, we know all the stats. Some reason, some people have a block about what's your weight, what are your macros, what are your calories, what are you consuming. But I look at it in exactly the same way. You know, knowledge is power. What gets measured gets done. And, you know, if you are depleted in a certain area, if you're overweight, if you're underweight, if you're not feeling as strong as you want, know what's going into your body, because at the end of the day, it's like petrol in a car. Know what goes in and adjust accordingly. So for me, I have like I eat 5 times a day. I know exactly what I'm going to eat. I plan it up front. But don't get me wrong, I also have cake. I also have champagne when I want to, or the odd martini. Not so much now when we're stuck indoors, but, you know, it's all in moderation really, but with a view that, you know, what's going to do my body the best ultimately. I wanted to ask you about supplements, if that's okay, because I know that's a real area of expertise for you. And again, you know, I think my first bit of advice to everybody would get the basics right first. Don't worry about supplements, because they're all the extras afterwards. It's pointless eating a bad diet and then having supplements try and counteract it, I think. But what's your advice on that?
Absolutely. So look, as a nutritionist, I am always, in most situations, there are chronic diseases and concerns that people come to me, and I'm like, there's supplements is the only way we can go with you right now. I'm food first. So get in your omega-3 from eating oily fish and chia seeds and walnuts, things like that. Try and get in those ratios that I keep going on about with the macros. Colourful fruits and veg, they are nature's multivitamins and they taste delicious. So, I'm not talking about just chomping on raw ones, make them taste good, because that really contributes and makes it easier to get those in.
Nature's vitamins is a lovely thing to say, yeah.
So try that first, but there are certain situations where people's needs are higher. If they work out a lot, if they're on restrictive diets, they might have a chronic health concern, and they may not be getting enough nutrients from their food because of the quality of the food or a history. They might have gut health problems, so they're not absorbing their nutrients, which I do see a lot of. So in terms of from that onwards, so for those of you watching, Andrew and I did meet through a company called Bionic, who I've been working for 2 years. And I chose to work with them because they are what I believe is a really incredibly thorough and pinpointed supplement. Because the reason behind it is they take your bloods, you work with a nutritionist, and they give you exactly what your body shows that you need. And for me, there's nothing better than that, because you've got the data. You've got data and they're giving you what you need. Whereas a lot of these multivitamins out there are giving you things that you don't even need because you're getting them through your diet. So you've got expensive urine because you're weeing it all out. So this way, I really love it because it's tailored and it gives you, the right kind of things that you need. And I see it across the journey of time with Bionic clients, because we constantly routinely check their bloods, and you see these nutrient deficiencies go up, and people tell me, oh yeah, my hair's thicker, I'm sleeping a bit better, I'm not as irritable, all of these many different symptoms that can kind of change and happen, not just physical. And it's wonderful. So I am really a fan, if you can, to go through personalized supplementation. And that's kind of how I work in my practice, in that I don't really like to give people too many supplements unless I've run their bloods or I've run a stool test, for example, because I want to know what's going on in there before doing more damage than good, or just spending lots of money on supplements and you don't need them. So having that data is really incredible, and being able to kind of target it like that. But if you're one of these people that you're not really sure where to start, you don't know if you want to definitely jump on the bandwagon of getting the bloods and the supplements, which it is worth checking out. But otherwise, if not, starting with your vitamin D is absolutely the number one for me. It's priority over any single nutrient multivitamin with every single person. There isn't a person that's exempt. So making sure you're getting your vitamin D through supplementation between the months of October to April, because as you can see outside, I know we had a wonderful weather this weekend, but we just don't get enough vitamin D, especially because we're spending more time indoors, working from home, no travel, and we get vitamin D from sun exposure, which we're not getting at the moment. So start there as a starting point. And then if you're vegan or plant-based, you need to be looking at B vitamins, particularly B12. You should be supplementing if you're vegan or B12. I do eat animal products, a little bit, fish, things like that, but not a huge amount. And I take B12 just because I know my requirement is a little bit higher. I exercise a lot, I think I'm a woman, and that's really important, B12, part of the kind of iron balance in the body. So those are the two kind of ones I would start if you're not going to go down the personalized route.
Yeah, definitely. Would you do fish oil as well?
Yeah, look, I think you can get omega-3 from your diet. The problem is lots of people don't, because omega-3 is found in salmon, mackerel, anchovy, sardines, and herring and trout. So you're very fishy fish. So lots of people are like, I don't want to eat that. You know, and you've got to have it 2 times a week to get in a good amount, and good portions. And two is a minimum that I normally say for people. And then the chia seeds, walnuts, flax seeds, you've got to have a lot. You've got to have 4 to 5 30-gram portions, which is quite a lot, especially if you're looking at your fat intake. And some people don't like them. They don't want to chomp on raw walnuts. It's not that fun. Maybe for me, because I'm a nutritionist, but for most people, it's not. So that's when omega-3 comes in. If you can't get it in through your diet, it can be fantastic for cognitive function, for cardiovascular health, looking after hormones and mood as well. It's anti-inflammatory, so supports immune system function. So a good quality fish oil. Bionic do one, which is the one that I take. I don't know if you take the Bionic one or not, but Bionic do an amazing fish oil, which is really good quality, low mercury, which is a concern for some fish oils because they can accumulate mercury in some fish oil supplements. So be aware of that. Or a vegan algae supplement.
Yeah, I think there's so many options for vegans now as well, which is
Yeah.
brilliant. You can still get all your protein as a vegan, etc. I think the bionic concept is just fabulous, and as you say, that's how we met. Just a bit of that from my perspective, as I've always, been very keen on always the last 4 years for sure, been very interested in nutrition, and I've been taking the 3 that you mentioned. And that was reflective in the blood. So Bionic came along, they take your bloods, and they take it properly as well, 6 vials of blood, not just a finger prick. And then what they do, and what I love about this, is you get this sort of bespoke mix of supplements. They're like little granules, and you get told how much to take. And on the side of the bottle, you can see, and they give you like 2 months worth, and they then come back and test your blood again. And what you can see on the bottle is that for mine, I had 18 different supplements. And to take 18 different supplements, even though I eat a really healthy diet and I eat 5 times a day and all of that, and have green juice, etc., I wouldn't take 18 supplements. I really wouldn't. 3 or 4 is quite enough. So I thought that was brilliant. Actually, we actually had the Bionic lady on. So on the YBMB program, I always we do coaching calls as well as workouts and things like that with our members, and I always have guest speakers on, and I had the Bionic lady on as well. And we've got a special sort of offer on YBMB with Bionic. So I was really so happy with that, because I only ever, and there's no sort of kickback or commission or anything like that to me, but I really do advocate things that I firmly believe in. And I just think such a great concept. And also to have someone like yourself, Clarissa, as well, to then sort of, discuss what the results of your bloods are, because it's all very well to have your bloods, that's step 1, but then to make sense of it, as I say, someone like you who explains it makes such a difference. Because if you're sort of in the red or orange zones in some things, you don't know if that's sort of what that means really, and whether that's really how important that is. And you're really great at putting context on that. So fab. And I think we didn't really talk a lot about water, but I mean, I don't know if we maybe should finish off with a bit, if we should be finish off with a bit about sort of hydration, because so many people, I always say that we would not think about not showering, for example, or showering in coffee and Coke and wine, and yet we think nothing of doing that to our body, not giving it any hydration, and then chucking some wine down there and some black coffee, etc. And our poor insides, although we can't see them, they need to be looked after particularly. And drinking water is so brilliant in terms of glow it gives you, it moves everything. So I mean, you need to be going to the toilet every day, and I'm amazed at how many people, they just don't. And so I know that's my view on water. So I try and drink it all the time, lots of it. But you do. What would you say to people about that?
Yeah, I normally say start at 1.5 litres if you can, and it's fine if you want to include herbal teas. It's fine if you want to flavour it with, some crushed blueberries in the bottom, or rosemary, or you can get Twinings infusions, which are just basically herbs, which can be quite a nice kind of flavour enhancer if you really find it a struggle. But start at 1.5 as a base. If you're doing a lot of cardiovascular exercise, you have to increase that because of the sweating. But also don't be fooled that just because it's cold outside that we don't need as much water, because central heating can make you really dehydrated. So we need to make sure that we're offsetting that. Now, from your diet, you can get some hydration for your body. So particularly if you're eating half your plate of fruits and vegetables, you're going to get in a good amount of hydration on top of that 1.5 litres. So you're pretty much at the right point if you're doing that and eating half your plate. However, lots of people aren't. And so they're eating a lot of carbohydrates predominantly, which can make you feel very thirsty, sluggish, all the rest of it. And when you eat a lot of carbohydrates, most people don't want to drink water as well, because it makes you bloat. And so they suddenly stop drinking water, it becomes a routine. And before you know it, they're having maybe 1 to 2 glasses of water, lots of coffee and tea, which can make you urinate a lot. So you're losing liquid. And these people can, you lose that kind of glow in your face. Their bowel movements are inconsistent. They might be a little bit constipated. They might be a little bit bloated, right through to kind of clarity and concentration and focus. If you're dehydrated, 20% of the output of your energy production can really begin to slow, and that is going to affect your performance and your productivity. So I start at 1.5, exercising 2 and above, but I don't think you need to go above sort of 2.5 to 3 litres unless you're doing saunas and all the rest of it.
Yeah. So and that brings us really nicely round to the conclusion, really, that you're doing all of this to stay strong and healthy and fit and to look great and feel great. But at the end of the day, you want to be an optimal human being. We do only have one body here for one life. I think we need to, you know, look after it to be here as long as we possibly can, but healthily, rather than just sort of, you know, substandard, because it is amazing when you feel great. And it means then that you've got all this energy to not just get through the day, but thrive, do lots of extra things, do lots of new careers, make an impact as much as you can. There's so many good reasons to eat, you know, well, other than just a six pack and to lose a bit of body fat. And that's certainly what I've seen, you know, and also I think the ripple effects it has, you know, once you start adopting these new healthy habits, people around you, well, firstly, they see the impacts on you and they want to copy. Secondly, you know, if you're cooking, your loved ones, they want to sort of, you know, join in as well. So we advocate this. We talk to people like Clarissa, and we learn, you know, their knowledge, and we implement it in our program. So if you want to hear more, then like I say, you can go on Clarissa's Instagram page, and she's got loads and loads of brilliant posts and talks, you know, audio and everything else like that you can listen to. And if you want to participate with our program, we'll hold you accountable and set out all of the things, a roadmap really to take you on your health and fitness and business journey, then I think there's a link in the notes here. Clarissa, anything else that we've not mentioned that we really should as part of our first talk? I'm sure we'll have you on again because you're a wealth of knowledge, but anything else that you think we should leave people with?
Oh, that, I mean, I don't even know how to end that one. I think one of the things I'm really passionate about, maybe this is a bit geeky, but, you know, for me, all disease begins in the gut. And if you really are feeling unwell and you've tried eating well, you're drinking, you're managing your stress, and you have any sort of chronic complaints, even weight management, you've got to look at your gut. Look at what you're putting in, look at how you're treating it. That is something I'm so passionate about. Is what I intend to spend my rest of my career kind of focusing through. So think about looking after your gut. 95% of serotonin, which is our feel-good, happy hormones, created in the gut. So everything we do to our gut looks after our mood, and 70% of the immune system's in there. So, I mean, those two things alone hopefully can make people think about looking after their gut, eating lots of colourful fruits and veg, drinking water to make sure you're going to the toilet. And yeah, check me out on Instagram because I do share lots of gut health tips and tricks.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, I think as you were talking then, that old saying, "You are what you eat," came to mind, and you know, these things are old sayings because generally speaking, they're true. So,
you know what I like? You are what you absorb.
You are, absolutely.
The gut's got to be good enough to absorb all those wonderful things you're putting in. Yeah,
very much so. All right, we'll talk about that again. And thank you so much, Clarissa. Really appreciate those tips, and have a lovely day.
Thank you for having me. Really.